Welcome to the Cutting Onions podcast with Bobby Shaw, where we celebrate culture that develops leaders. On this week's episode, I sit down with Damon Biggins for part one of a two-part conversation where we discuss his amazing career, creating a culture, reproducing that culture internationally, and why culture matters. In this wide-ranging conversation, Damon discusses his start in the restaurant industry with McDonald's and how that took him to a little-known burrito joint in Austin, Texas, back in 2003. We talk about Damon becoming a restaurateur at Chipotle and the meeting I was in as a new regional director where I nominated him to open Canada as a part of Chipotle's international expansion, and then called him afterwards to make sure it was something he wanted to do. From there, Damon went on to open Paris and worked internationally for 7 years before returning home to the U.S. and the great state of Texas. And this is just part one of the conversation, so you can probably see why I had to split this conversation into two parts. I know many of you have been waiting for this conversation with Damon, so here it is, part one of an incredibly powerful two-part conversation. I'm so proud of Damon and everything he's accomplished, and he's got so much more ahead of him. Here you go, and we'll see you on the other side.
So good morning, Damon. I appreciate you so much taking the time this morning to be able to chat with me about these questions and, really introduce yourself to an audience, whether that's 2 or 200 people who might listen to this. When I was putting together this list of folks to talk to, you were definitely at the top of that list. And I just think you have such a compelling story and have an incredible background. And I just think we should spend some time today on that. So, if you would, I would love to kind of give me a little bit of your story. Tell me who you are. Tell me about how you got here.
Got it. Well, first, I'm flattered you reached out to me, Bobby, and incredibly honored to be on your podcast. My name is Damon Biggins. I'm 47 years old, living in Cedar Park, Texas. Married, 22 years, have a 20-year-old son. Been in restaurant business now for arguably my whole life. My dad was a McDonald's executive, started part-time flipping burgers back in the early 70s. And so I grew up around the food service industry and in it. Went to college for something completely different, but ended up in the food service. And I did it as a part-time job in college, and it was something that I really enjoyed and I wasn't terrible at. So I pursued it further, and fast forward now under my own career, pushing 25 years in food service.
Right. So when you got going, Damon, like in those early days when you were at McDonald's, and I was at McDonald's too, and I think a lot of us have started our career or spent some time in that, in that organization. And so when you were first getting going, did anyone ever tell you, like, why are you working there? Like, why are you doing that? Or like, why are you in the restaurant business? Like, did you ever get that from anybody?
No. And because for me, I've known it from my father working there so long, and I saw such value in it. He had a great career trajectory and allowed us to travel the world with McDonald's, and I saw no downside to it. I guess when I got in, it was because I went in on the ground level, and seeing it from that perspective was a little different from the executive perspective that I grew up with. And so that was, but it wasn't wrong by any means. It was more of a calibration thing. And, I understood I had to learn how to mop the floors. I learned how to clean the fryers. I learned how to make great fries. I learned, how to calibrate the clamshell grills, all that stuff. That, I still understand that today. And it's funny, about what McDonald's teaches you how to mop floors. I teach kids today how to mop floors. Because it's not something that's taught often. And
it's really not. And you know what? It's so funny. I was going to ask you about that. Like, how many of those early days lessons that you learned back there that you still use today? And that's a great example of one.
Yeah, most of them. And I guess connecting with that is when meeting your young team members or young leaders, the importance of teaching and coaching the right way from the beginning. When with folks who are taught improperly, how much longer they hang on to those bad habits than if they're taught the good habits in the first place. And Absolutely. To convert, to change those bad habits into good habits. So really being mindful of that. And that's something that I had some really good leaders when I was, a young team member and a young manager that helped coach me correctly the first time in the first way. And, I didn't fully appreciate that until I encountered some folks that didn't have that same value.
Right.
And, and it took a while to kind of, piece that stuff together. And then as I was developing my style, planning and preparation, what worked great to help me and how can I better help them? And if it's 1% better, than I'm helping them, then we're going in the right direction.
I think that's beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think so many times that as leaders, we try to hit the home run, and sometimes we need to hit a double, right? Sometimes we just need to move the runner. Sometimes we just need to, advance the runners on base, right? So it's not always going for the home run or the grand slam, but it's that 1% better. And I love that. So you were at McDonald's. So tell me how long you were there again? Like, what was your total
I was there,
time there?
Collectively about 7 years. So I was there for a bit in college, left, worked for a couple of years, left. And then, then I got a GM role, and I was there for 2 years. Nice. So, collectively about 7 years.
Awesome. So then what was next in your career after that?
I went to Chipotle, Mexican Grill after that.
Chipotle, when did you start?
2003, fall of 2003. Nice. At the time, Chipotle was a partner brand of McDonald's, and through a network, I was working for McDonald's in Salt Lake City, Utah at the time. And, it was beautiful country, but my wife's from Texas and we wanted to get back down here. And so I just through the network, family friend who worked for McDonald's says, hey, there's this cool little burrito outfit, growing, young, hip, you'd fit in perfectly. So I had a job interview with one of our former colleagues, and it was basically Austin or bust. We packed up the U-Haul, drove down here with a job interview, and got in. So I went from a GM with McDonald's to, at the time, was a supervisor with Chipotle. And so it was, tightening the purse strings and getting down to work. But it was a good cosmic reset, and learned Chipotle from the ground up.
That's really fantastic. So you began in the fall of 2003, and you were in Austin. And so at what point in that, you're there, you're working, and you realize, like, and I know you heard good things about it, but like, at what point did you realize, like, hey, this actually might be something? Like, at what point was that?
Almost immediately. I interviewed a few GMs in the market and the area manager at the time. And it was the last GM that took me on board and kind of, recommended me to the area manager. And they said, you're kind of overqualified. We don't have a GM position available, but we can get you in. And, but I think what really jazzed me was the attentiveness of the GMs that I spoke with, the passion that came through in their voice about the people and the food, and which has been part of me, this is part of me. And it really connected. And then the environment was, the music was just a little too loud, which was great. And the energy was pumping, and the food was delicious, and it just had a really great vibe. So it checked all my quick boxes.
Yeah, absolutely. We share similar stories. So I started about a year before you did. And but the same time frame, except I was at the time in Kansas City, which is where I am today, oddly enough. So, I started, and it was kind of the same thing. Like, I didn't really know. I mean, I didn't know a lot about Chipotle at the time. I did my research, but I didn't know a lot about it. And I didn't know anyone who did know a lot about it. So it was like one of those. So, I had my first, had my first interview with a recruiter, Allison Hosgood, who ended up being my VP of HR and training many, many years later at another concept. So it's funny how all these things go full circle. But I remember talking to her going, okay, this sounds like it might be. And I remember getting off that phone call. I remember going upstairs and telling Evan, my wife, like, hey, like, I don't really know, but I think we should go check it out, So And then it was kind of that same thing, right? Like early on in the process, I knew, okay, this is really something here. Like I'd never seen anything like that, like so scratch kitchen, so like hands on, right? And especially coming from our background at McDonald's, right?
Yeah.
Very, very, very different. Very, very different, right? So, it was super cool. And it didn't take long, when I was getting started to know that, hey, this could really be something. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
So,
and then as I got dug into it a little bit, it was, I think we had 62 total items in the whole building, and so it was easy to get my arms wrapped around. But then that afforded the time to really, dig into the details. The perfectly cooked food, perfectly cut, perfectly presented, perfectly rolled burritos.
Right.
I mean,
that's right.
You weren't distracted and pulled so many directions that you could really focus on the quality and the presentation.
That's right. So how long from the time you started and you came in as an hourly supervisor, as a kind of an hourly manager? So how long did it take for you to get to the next level? And what was your next level?
So it was at the time called assistant manager, and that was in December. So 3 months.
Not long.
Not long at all. Yep. And that was benchmarked to be the assistant manager at the 8th and Congress location in downtown Austin.
Yep.
But that was getting pushed. So I ended up supporting San Antonio in an assistant manager role. Opened up 2 restaurants the same day down there. There was Forum and Quarry, I believe.
I think it was. Yep.
So I supported the Forum for about 6 weeks. And that got me, out of my comfort zone for sure. I was in San Antonio where I'd never been, and, a brand new market, and the field leader down there was, getting his feet underneath him. And so I learned a lot, and the thing that kept me grounded and focused was, it didn't change. It was about the food and it was about the people, both, the team members and the guests. And so that was my guiding light, so to speak. And then, rotated back up to Austin to open up the 8th and Congress location. I did that for, 6 months as the assistant, and then was asked to take over the Georgetown location as the general manager.
Right.
That was, probably within, a year of hire from hourly supervisor to GM, about 13 months.
That's pretty quick trajectory.
Yeah. And I was hungry. I was very, and still am, quite ambitious, but doing it the right way and knowing that I can only grow if I have my replacement ready. Because that was an understanding I learned as a young manager, and being able to apply that in a growing market with a growing brand. It was pretty quick because there was opportunities available.
Right. Absolutely. So then what came next after that? So you went to Georgetown.
So I went to Georgetown, ran that for 9 months, opened up our Lakeline location in Cedar Park. And that was my first new restaurant opening experience. Opened that as a general manager. Then we did that for, probably 6 to 9 months. And then was asked to move to our Round Rock location and as the senior restaurant manager. So I was responsible for taking on managers in training, putting them through our boot camp that we had at the time.
Yep.
And sending them off into the wild. And that was an excellent experience. So really making sure the restaurant was operating at a real high level. So folks who were coming in were getting not only the best training, but the best experience that Chipotle had to offer at the time. In terms of culture, in terms of people development, in terms of food quality, in terms of guest satisfaction.
Yep.
So that was a great honor. It was the one in the market.
And do you remember when you moved to that location? Do you remember what month it was by chance?
Oh, goodness. I'm kind of working backwards from...
It would have been 05, right? It would have been 05.
It would have been, mid 05, I think, late 05.
Yeah. So that's where I met you first. So you were at Round Rock. So I moved from Kansas City, and we rolled into Austin with kind of same thing, right? Truck loaded up, headed south, 12 hours, 2 right turns. And but that's where I met you first. And so just for everyone listening on this on this podcast.